November 15, 1963. A closed booth in the soundstage. The red light is on, a silent, accusatory eye. Dean Martin stands alone with the microphone, but he isn't singing. He's listening to a playback. It's a song about heartbreak, but the crack in his voice isn't an act. He hears it. So does the sound engineer, who looks away. Outside, a fleet of black Cadillacs wait, their engines cooling on the Paramount lot, their drivers in dark suits watching the stage door. Dean leans his forehead against the cold glass of the booth. His reflection is a ghost of the man America knows, the king of cool, the unflappable crooner who never breaks a sweat. He is about to go out in front of a live audience and give the performance of his life. He will smile. He will tell a joke. He will make it all look effortless. But in this silent booth with the ghosts of that year closing in, Dean Martin is a man who has already lost everything. His family, his best friend. And in a way few understood then, his very soul. The question was never how he went on. The question was, why did he have to? And what secret debt, signed in blood and laughter, forced him to smile for the cameras while his world burned down behind the curtain? To understand that moment, you have to go back to a different kind of smoke. The golden, forgiving haze of a nightclub in 1946. The air in New York's Copa Room is electric with the smell of gin, sweat, and ambition. A young man from Steubenville, Ohio, named Dino Crosty steps into the spotlight. He isn't Dean Martin yet, not fully. But he has the voice, a velvety baritone that seems to wrap around the room like a warm embrace, and he has the look. Dark, liquid eyes that hold a secret sorrow even when he smiles. The women sigh. The men raise their glasses. He is effortless, or so it seems. What they don't see are the knuckles he bruised on boxing bags, the mornings he woke up with a foreign language in his mouth, the immigrant son fear of never being enough. He built his cool from the ground up, brick by invisible brick, a fortress against the world. And then came the atom bomb of talent wrapped in a clown suit, Jerry Lewis. Their meeting was cosmic combustion, the handsome crooner and the chaotic monkey, the straight man and the human explosion. It was magic because it was misery. It was love because it was war. The stage became a pressure cooker. Night after night, the laughter was deafening, a narcotic more potent than any drink. They became Martin and Lewis, the biggest stars in the universe. The money was obscene. The fame was a screaming animal they could never cage. But in the quiet of a limousine after the last flashbulb had died, a different tension settled. Jerry, a comet of need and manic energy. Dean, a man who valued silence, a good hand of cards, and the sanctity of a closed door. The fractures began as hairline cracks, almost invisible. A joke Jerry took too far. A dinner Dean missed. A look of utter exhaustion on Dean's face as Jerry performed. Yet another hour of unscripted, desperate chaos for the cameras long after the director had called cut. It was during this stratospheric rise that the shadows first lengthened. They came not from critics but from the corners of rooms, men with quiet voices and expensive watches. The Sunset Strip in the 1950s wasn't just a boulevard of dreams, it was a boardwalk owned by whispers. The mob loved show business. It was clean money, it was glamorous, and it was a powerful lever. Dean, with his easy charm and old-world manners, was a natural friend to these men. They understood him. They came from the same streets, spoke the same language of loyalty and danger. He'd gamble with them at the Friars Club. They'd send over bottles of Dom Perignon to his table. It was just business. It was just friendship. Or so he told himself. But in Hollywood, there are no free bottles of champagne. Every gift has a price tag tucked discreetly underneath the ribbon. And Dean, whether he admitted it or not, was running up a tab. The breaking point with Jerry wasn't a scream. It was a silence. 1956, the Copacabana, their last performance together. The air backstage was colder than the ice in the champagne buckets. They didn't speak. They passed each other like ships in a fog, carrying 10 years of love and resentment as cargo. When the final curtain fell, there was no embrace, no final goodbye. Just two men walking to separate dressing rooms, the door closing on the most successful partnership in entertainment history. The public was devastated. The studios panicked. But Dean felt a terrifying, hollow freedom. He was alone. And being alone in Hollywood when you have his tab with certain friends is a very dangerous thing. Because the mob doesn't deal in sentimental goodbyes. They deal in assets. And with Jerry gone, Dean was no longer half of a partnership. He was a single, lucrative, vulnerable entity. The pressure, once a gentle suggestion, became a firm hand on the shoulder. There were investments to be made. Appearances at certain clubs that needed a star's glow. A percentage of a new casino that just needed his name, asterisk just as a favor, asterisk. The easy smiles from the corner booth grew tighter, the eyes behind them more calculating. Dean played the game. He was the coolest guy in the room. He never let them see him sweat. But in the privacy of his home, a new ritual began. The carefully constructed Dean Martin, the man who famously pretended to be drunk to keep the world at a distance, now found himself actually drinking to drown a very real fear. He was in a gilded cage, and the men who held the key were not the forgiving type. Then the unthinkable happened, not in the shadowy underworld but in the sun-drenched, supposedly safe world of his own home. 1962. His marriage to Jean, the love of his life, the foundation he clung to, began to publicly unravel. The papers feasted on it. Dean Martin's wife files for divorce. The perfect image of the suave, family-loving crooner was shattered. But that wasn't the secret that destroyed him. The secret was the reason why. The pressure from the outside world, the threats, the debts, the constant smiling menace, had seeped into his sanctuary. The man who was paying a different kind of price to shadowy figures was now paying with the peace of his own family. He was losing them, one by one, and he felt powerless to stop it. The fortress of cool was crumbling from the inside out. And then the final, cruelest blow. March of 1963. A phone call in the dead of night. His son Dean Paul, his little dino, was in the hospital. A freak accident, a jet crash. The boy would survive, but he was broken, physically shattered. Dean stood in that sterile white hallway, a man who could command a stage of thousands, utterly helpless. The guilt was a physical weight. Was this his penance? Was the chaos of his professional life, the dangerous company he kept, now visiting itself upon his children? He prayed in a way he hadn't since he was a boy in Steubenville. He made promises to God he wasn't sure he could keep. The world saw Dean Martin continue to film Robin and the Seven Hoods with Sinatra and the Rat Pack. They saw him joke and golf. They saw the unflappable icon. What they didn't see was the man staring at his sleeping son's broken body, making a silent, desperate calculation about the cost of his own life. This is where the real story begins, the story they tried to bury, because it was in this vulnerable, shattered state that the collectors came calling. The debt was due, and it wasn't about money anymore. It was about a favor, a big one. A performance at a venue that was, let's say, off the standard touring circuit. A venue owned by people who didn't take no for an answer. The request was delivered not as a threat, but as a reminder of friendship, of loyalty, of how interconnected their worlds had become. To refuse was unthinkable. It would be more than a breach of contract. It would be a personal insult. And in that world, insults were settled not with lawyers, but with consequences. Dean was trapped. His family was fracturing, his spirit was broken, and now the very talent that was his salvation was being leveraged as a weapon against him. November 15, 1963. The day arrives. He has a scheduled performance at the Copa, a legitimate sold-out show, but earlier that day he has another commitment, the one he couldn't refuse. He is driven to a private, unmarked club outside the city. The atmosphere is not one of entertainment, but of transaction. He performs. He sings Volare, and that's a mare for a room of stone-faced men and their elegantly dressed companions. There is applause, but it is measured like the ticking of a clock. He is not Dean Martin the star here. He is Dean Martin the commodity fulfilling an obligation. A man he knows only as Mr. Carbone approaches him after, grips his hand a little too tightly and says, "Beautiful Dino, just beautiful, see. We're all family here." The words taste like ash. He is driven back to Hollywood, to the soundstage, to that recording booth. The emotional whiplash is absolute, from a room of quiet menace to the fake cheer of a television set. He has to record a promotional spot, a cheerful song for his upcoming TV special. The engineer cues the track. Dean opens his mouth to sing and nothing comes out. Then a sound so raw, so filled with a lifetime of suppressed terror and grief, that the engineer flinches. He stops the tape. He asks if Mr. Martin is okay. Dean doesn't answer. He just stares at the microphone, this instrument of his fortune and his curse. He is thinking of his son in a hospital bed. He is thinking of Jean packing her bags. He is thinking of Jerry and the simple, brutal friendship they once had. He is thinking of the handshake of Mr. Carbone. In this moment, he has lost it all. His family is broken. His partnership is a ghost. His freedom is an illusion. He is a puppet, and he can finally see all the strings. And still, the show must go on, because the men in the Cadillacs are watching, because the network has a time slot to fill, because Dean Martin is a brand and brands don't get to fall apart. He takes a breath. He signals for the tape to roll again, and he sings, perfectly, smoothly. The crack is gone, buried under a lifetime of professional discipline. This is the performance of his life. Not the one at the Copa that night, where he'll drink water disguised as vodka and make 1,000 people believe he's having the time of his life. No, the performance is here in this booth, convincing a single sound engineer that everything is just fine. He goes on that night. He kills at the Copa. The audience roars. They see the Dean they've always loved. What they are actually witnessing is the most expensive cover-up in Hollywood history, a man paying for his survival with a piece of his soul in real time. The smile is a masterpiece of deception. The swagger is a suit of armor. Every joke is a deflection. He is disappearing inside his own legend. The aftermath was a quiet 30-year unraveling. He rebuilt a career, a solo superstar. He had hits. He had the Dean Martin Show asterisk. He had the love of a new generation. But those who knew him best, the few he let inside the fortress, saw the change. The melancholy deepened. The drinking, once a prop, became a refuge. The man who cherished solitude became a recluse in plain sight, surrounded by people yet profoundly alone. He repaired things with Jerry decades later, in a tearful, fragile reconciliation that was more of a funeral for what they'd lost than a rebirth. He loved his children fiercely. But the ghost of that year of 1963 never left him. It was in the extra beat of silence before a laugh, in the way his eyes would sometimes drift during a crowded party, looking at a door, a window, an exit. Hollywood didn't bury this story with a single memo or a scandalous headline. They buried it with the much more effective tool of myth. They polished the legend of King Cool, the man who never tried, who floated above it all. They turned his pain into a punchline. All Dino, always buzzed, never a care in the world. The truth, the fear, the coercion, the devastating cost of his own success was too messy, too dark, too real. It didn't fit the glittering narrative. So they let it die in the whispers of old waiters at Musso and Frank, in the silenced memories of retired stagehands, in the unspoken understanding among those who knew the price of the Sunset Strip's glitter. Dean Martin died on Christmas Day, 1995. The official cause was acute respiratory failure, but those who understand the story, who have traced the cracks back to their source, know he'd been carrying a fatal weight for decades. The weight of a smile he had to wear when his heart was breaking. The weight of a debt paid not in cash, but in the quiet, relentless erosion of a man's spirit. He went on stage that night in 1963 after losing everything, not because he was strong, but because he had no other choice. The curtain had to rise, the band had to play, and the coolest man in the world had to prove one last time that he felt nothing at all. This is the confession that was never recorded, the one written in the empty glasses he left behind, in the echo of a laugh that didn't quite reach his eyes, in the silent, decades-long scream behind the song. This is the real story of Dean Martin, not the legend they sold you, but the man they buried with it. If you believe that some truths are too important to be left in the dark, if you think the real cost of fame deserves to be remembered, then you're already part of this mission. You're one of us now. Help us uncover the stories they never wanted told. Share this. Subscribe to *Hollywood Untold Files*, because history isn't just written by the winners. Sometimes it's whispered by the ghosts they left behind. And Dean Martin's ghost has been whispering for a long, long time.